Hey guys, Tracy here, and today I thought I would share with you the journey that Lonnie and I went through to buy the land that we're on, that our tiny house sits on. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we had to do to make sure that we found a piece of property that would actually work for our tiny home. The first thing I want to share with you is that Lonnie and I are dreamers. We're always thinking about what the future might hold. We're always actively searching and looking for opportunities. So that's the first thing I would say that we did, was have an idea and a dream in mind and discuss it amongst yourselves. So Lonnie and I talk a lot about our future. We talk about the things that we hope will happen, our dreams, and things that we don't think we can accomplish, things that we think are reasonable to accomplish. And we're always talking about these things so that we can have them in the back of our head and then start actively planning for it in case an opportunity arises. And when you are searching for things, I think, and you're actively planning and dreaming, I think those opportunities come quicker than you might think. So then I began actively looking in Zillow for houses, actually, that met my criteria. We found a house that was really a piece of junk, but I fell in love with it. So I'm not going to say I wasn't in love with this home. It was, I think, in 2022 or 2023. I think it was 2022, maybe 2023 when we were looking at it. But the home itself was very small, and I wanted a tiny house. I wanted a small house. I'm kind of over cleaning large houses. When you've had a very large house, it really helps to kind of show you like how much work is actually involved and how much money it takes to actually maintain a house like that. And that's just something that Lonnie and I, as we get older, it's just not something we're interested in doing. So I wanted a smaller home. And so we've been looking, and I found a home and I loved it. But the problem is we got outbid. And I'm so glad that we did get outbid for that home, because my initial estimate to gut that out and redo it with Lonnie and I doing all of the work was $100,000. I now think it would probably have been $150,000 to do the work. There was some black mold in it. There was like poop on the second floor. It was a disaster, but it was the right piece. It was a beautiful piece of property with very, very gorgeous views for miles and so peaceful. And that's what I was looking for. So we didn't get that property. I was so bummed and disappointed. We continued to look for property around the area because it was just, I think the first thing was, as I was looking in Zillow, Lonnie and I decided that there was certain areas that we wanted to live. But I forgot to tell you how we even decided to live in Arizona. I have lived in Arizona for a long time, and I love Arizona. But before we chose to buy this property line, Lonnie and I took months to travel around the western United States in a van and look at different areas that we wanted to live in. So any of the places that we ever dreamed of living in, we went to go see and actually stay. And I was so surprised because I thought that Montana was going to be it for me. And Montana was crossed off the list so quickly that I was surprised. In fact, I didn't even have Idaho on my list, and that was my second place. So Arizona we kind of narrowed it down after our travel to Arizona and Idaho. And we picked Arizona because our family is here and we just love it. So that's how we ended up with Arizona. Then we had to kind of narrow it down. So we narrowed it down by continuing to travel in Arizona. So we've traveled northern Arizona, southern Arizona. We've been through all of Arizona. I can tell you we know a lot about Arizona and we love it. And so we decided actually to pick where we are here because it's really closer to family, and we can be of help when we need to be of help, and we can be close to the people that we love and still have everything that we want, our dreams. So that's kind of how we narrowed it down to Arizona. But as it were, we needed to find a home that we could either rebuild or we could start from scratch. And the more and more we were looking at rebuilds, the more and more the cost of the rebuilds, these fixer-uppers were just like garbage. So we just continued to look. Finally, we found a few places, and now by this time we had found a realtor, obviously, because I found a property on Zillow. That was kind of the initial interest with the realtor of the area that I wanted to go see. And then that's when we made the offer. So we continue to use that realtor for looking for properties. Now, do you need a realtor for all raw land? No, I don't think you do. What I'm trying to tell you is like, you need to do your due diligence. Have so many realtors that I know more about the property by the time I get set on my feet on the ground than they do. They send me everything, I review it, but maybe they've looked at it 5 minutes before they showed up, if at all. Like most of the time they're like, okay, here's the address, and then they look at it with me, but I've already done all the research. So I'll just say, have a realtor and know the property probably better than they do. Don't just rely on what the realtor says, because I guarantee you the realtor doesn't have time to put that effort into it, and this is your property and you need to have a good idea of what it is that you're buying. At the end of the day, you're the one that's buying it. So we found, obviously had found a realtor. We were actively searching for the realtor. They'd be sending us listings. We'd be saying no, listings, no, back and forth. So then once we would have a few to look at, we would come and tour the area with a realtor. We saw multiple properties, some with homes, some that needed restoration, some that needed it really just to be pulled down. Like I saw homes go for about what I paid for this. Like that mobile home needed to be put on fire and towed away. But somebody bought it, and because they wanted it and they wanted the view and they wanted the land. But I tell you what, when I walked through that mobile home, the floor was squishy. And if you don't want to be in a mobile home where the floor is squishy, at any rate, I didn't get that one, obviously. But we would look at different homes. We found a couple of them that we were interested in. We did put some offers in, mostly kind of lower, because we knew that the market was kind of at its peak and we didn't want to overpay for property. And eventually those properties sold for more than what we were looking to pay for. So there is a lot of competition out there for homes, especially in 2022, obviously in 2021, a little bit in 2023 and 24, but it's starting to really, you're starting to be able to get deals now, at least. At any point, we knew the area, we were looking at homes, and as we're driving, I saw a camper on a lot. And I turned to the realtor and I said, is someone living in that camper? And the realtor was like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, is that legal? And she's like, I don't know, I guess. And that kind of initially sparked my idea that I could buy land in the area and put my camper on. I had initially been looking for homes that to retrofit, or not retrofit, but to restore. So anyways, we called zoning, my husband and I, and we said, hey, we're looking for land in this area. And we noticed that in the zoning regulations, you are allowing trailers. Can you give us some more definition on what it is a trailer? And so we ended up talking to zoning and finding out that the area that we're in will allow you to live in your camper legally. And we had a camper at the time, so that was amazing. So that really helped us to kind of go, okay, we don't have to build a house today, but we can buy land and live on it in our RV, which is eventually what we ended up doing here at this property. So after we started looking in the area, looking at homes, then understanding what the zoning of the area was, then we started getting even more serious and narrowing it down even further where we wanted to live. Now, some of you guys might say, hey, why would I want to live anywhere close to someone who's got a junky trailer on it? Well, you might not want to, and that's totally okay. But one of the things I like to look at are the surrounding homes. So there may be a home that has a trailer on it, and you might not be thrilled about that trailer, but 3 streets down is $1 million home, or in my case, a community of $1 million homes. So you could invest in something that doesn't look great today, but is up and coming, and eventually you may win on that investment. This is not investment advice. This is just me saying, consider the stuff that you might not consider in order to kind of win at the investment game later. Now, if you're looking to flip and, fix and flip, that's a whole other story. But I'm talking about like duration here, long term. In fact, I know that 10 acres that way, there was a meth house basically. And I know that sounds kind of odd. Why would you buy somewhere that's even close to a meth house? Honestly, you could have a meth house next door and not know that because people are crafty. But this community talks a lot. And so we kind of look out for each other. And that's how come I found that out. Eventually, they got swatted, and they were not on that property legally, and they're no longer there. I think they tried to set their place on fire. Not sure. Anyways, there's drama anywhere. All to say that you don't even know what your neighbor is doing. So it's very difficult to say that you're not going to find a place that's perfect. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You're going to find some things that are amazing, but things that are also not amazing with pretty much everything you get. And I'm encouraging you to think about areas that you wouldn't normally think of. Like, I know that I have bought property in like South Phoenix, and people are like, the gangs live there. It's the worst place to buy. Well, maybe, but the house is worth, 25% more than what it was that I paid for. So, okay, yeah, maybe not the best place, but a decent investment. So consider things that you normally wouldn't consider. But again, you have to do your due diligence, but doing your due diligence means that you talk to the neighbors, of course, but you may not be able to find out that the drug dealer lives next door. You just might not be able to find that out. So, all to say, do your due diligence, but I'm trying to tell you to consider things that you would normally not consider in the event that is a good deal, basically. So anyways, as we're continuing to look through property, we actually came to this property pretty early on in our search. I initially declined this property because it did not have access. So having access to the property is important. However, if it doesn't have, it had access, it had easement, but it just didn't have the driveway. And I didn't want to put a driveway into a piece of property because that's just a lot of money and a lot of work I wasn't interested in doing. So I initially passed on this property. But when I saw it the first time, I loved it. But unfortunately, I declined it because, number one, the lot was small. It's an acre, but the buildable space is small. And it didn't have access, which is the reason why most people were not buying this property and why the property had gone down significantly in price. So there was a reason why the price was lower on this piece of property. The property itself already had things that were important to me. Like, it had a septic that was approved, it had electric, and it had water already. So basically all I needed to do was figure out the road and park my RV up here. That was the whole plan. So after we looked at this property, we looked at many, many more property, and we eventually did decline this. We ended up picking up this property as an investment with somebody else as a team. And that person eventually got out of the deal, which meant that this place was mine and mine alone. So there was a little bit of weird stuff going on in that space. But one of the reasons why we did come back and purchase this property was because we were investing with somebody else. And we thought, well, with the split of the money, we would have a place to live with our RV, and it would be super cheap. It would be an amazing deal. So we went ahead and did that with that person and did invest with them. They had said they were looking for property. They wanted to do an investment, and we agreed and bought this property and then started improving the property. And that's how we actually got into this property. Again, it was on the list. It just wasn't at the top of the list, but from a pricing standpoint, it met the criteria for living in a smaller home. It met the criteria, but I had originally passed because of a few things, one of which was access. So once we went in with the investor, we went ahead and did all the improvements on the property, got the driveway in, did an additional septic clean out. We brought the water directly to the RV area, and then we parked our RV here and made a deck. So we had it all ready to go. Eventually the investor backed out of the deal. Probably a few months later, we ended up buying them out, which I'm so glad we did. I think that God does amazing things, and I'm so glad that eventually we bought this instead of my initial pass on it. So that is kind of the story of how we bought the property and why we bought the property and how we got here. We didn't talk about budget, which is something I think is important. Obviously, you need to have a budget in mind whenever you're looking for a place to live. I had a maximum budget amount that I wanted to pay for total living in this space. These days, it's actually really, really difficult to do. So Lonnie and I had planned on doing a lot of this ourselves. We actually did plan on building our own tiny house, but when we met Clever Tiny Homes, which is this home, we decided just to buy from them because everything that they were doing was exactly what I wanted to do. And they did it faster, better, cheaper than I could ever do it. So that's why we bought that home. You have to think about your budget. You have to think about what your maximum price is, what you would love to have it at, and then what the houses are in the area. Not an easy task, but I do like a challenge. So thinking about budget, thinking about what you can do, understanding the rules and regulations, talking to zoning. We had so many conversations with zoning on this property. This property is actually called a hillside lot, and hillside lots do require, in this county, a lot of space being left open for environmental reasons and for protection of the habitat here. We have a lot of animals here. We have a ton of deer, birds, owls, little chipmunks, quail, rabbits, javelina, coyote. We've got all of it here, including rattlesnake, although I haven't seen one yet. I haven't seen one. My neighbors have, but I haven't seen one. But the goal with the hillside community is to preserve a lot of the things. And so when you have a hillside lot, you actually can't build like a massive house on it unless you have a massive amount of acres. So there's a certain percentage of your property that you can actually build on. So that is why it's so important to understand what zoning is. And there was a bird there. I was like, what is that noise? What zoning is, what you can and can't do on your property, understanding if there are additional things like hillside regulations or other regulations that are specific to your property. I guarantee you the neighbor next door does not have a hillside lot, but they look like they're on a hillside, but it's not designated a hillside lot. So they don't have to do the same things that I do. So just because you buy in an area doesn't mean all the things and all the houses are consistent. So that's something that you might want to consider as well. We also didn't talk about the offer and negotiation process. And once we decided that this was the place that we were going to buy, we did put in an offer. The offer was countered, and then we ended up getting, I think, $5,000 total off the price that they had already reduced. So it actually ended up bringing a pretty decent deal for us. We went ahead and closed. I did have to do a couple other things for the seller, like write a letter of why she would want to have us as to buy our property, but that's okay. I didn't mind doing that. So then you negotiate the property, and then you work through title. Definitely have to work through title to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed so that you don't accidentally have a problem with title in the future. You never want to have a problem with title in the future, because if somebody owns your property, this is why it's so important to use a real estate agent, but also use a title company so that you make sure that everything is good to go with your lot. All right, so once we found the property and had decided with the investor we were going to go ahead and purchase the property, that was the decision when we started to do the negotiations with the actual seller. And so we went ahead and put our offer in. It was countered, and then we countered that one. I think that's how it went. And then we ended up eventually doing the other things that she needed us to do. She wanted me to write a letter as to why we would be a good fit to buy the property, and we submitted all of that. We put a deposit down, and then we were in escrow. We worked with a title company, which I highly recommend that you do. I have worked with title companies before, and they have got it wrong. In fact, I've worked with many title companies, and they have gotten a lot of things wrong. So I really think it's important to work with the title company and have title insurance, but also do your due diligence to understand truly what you're going to be buying. In many different deals we've done, and I'm not a real estate agent. I just have bought and purchased things for investment mostly. And most of them have worked out, so it's been okay. But there have been times where I have been talking to the title company and seeing that things are not what we thought they were. And then the title company would be, oh, there's an update, so let me go find that update. And they would go find it, or we would give it to them, whatever. So all to say, know what you're buying. Know what you're buying so much more than anyone else involved. Know it more than the title company. Know it more than a real estate agent. Know it more than the seller. I mean, know what you're buying and be smart about it. Don't just sit back and act and think that everyone knows what they're talking about. There's so many times that I've looked in Zillow and an agent has listed something completely wrong with the house, right? Or they say there's an HOA and there's not an HOA, or they say there's not an HOA and there is an HOA, which is one of the things that really I'm not a fan of HOAs. I like not having an HOA, but to each his own. All to say, we went through the negotiation process. We settled on a price. We went ahead and put a deposit on. Then we went to start working with the title company and getting everything closed. We did some inspections. We had a plumber come out, give us an estimate on running water all the way to where we're going to park the RVs, adding additional septic, adding additional water bed. We had quotes from internet companies so that we knew how much it was going to cost us to run internet. By the way, that was too expensive. They wanted $5,000 to run the line to the property, and we were like, no, we're going to get Starlink, no problem. We already had the septic tank here, so that obviously needed to be inspected. We had the electric was already on property, so that just needed to be looked at and made sure that it worked as well. And of course, I said we had the plumber come out and look at that as well. So do your due diligence on your property. Make sure everything you think you're getting. Make sure everything is working. Make sure everything passes whatever the zoning and legal requirements are. Your permits have to be put in. So once we closed on the property, we then put our permits in for the RV. And, believe it or not, you do have to work through the permitting process when you're trying to put an RV on land. So that's why it's so important to think about and do all that zoning work that we talked ahead of time, so that you know where you're buying and you know what is and what is not approved. Now, zoning's not going to tell you well, they might if you're nice enough and maybe you stop by the office. But generally, they're not going to tell you that you can put a specific RV model on your property. They don't know all the different models, so they can't really tell you that, but they can tell you, oh, we allow trailers. And then you can get more specific as to what they mean by that. And they'll say something like 4 wheels, has these things, is approved by the RV industry, has these designations. Like in the tiny home community, NOAA there's many different certifications, one of them which is the NOAA certification. And so they will tell you what they need for whatever it is you're putting on that property. And then once you get the property and it's closed, then you work through the permitting process. So that was kind of the next step after that, was going through the permitting process. We did permit the RV initially. Once we removed the RV from the property, we had to also resubmit the permit for the tiny home, and that was a whole other process. A lot of zoning and counties don't know what to do with tiny houses right now. They don't see them very often, but they're starting to see them more and more. In fact, when we did the permitting on this one and we did the inspection, the officer asked if it was okay, if we wouldn't mind showing the inside of the house. So of course we showed him the inside of the house, but it wasn't part of the actual approval. And he was delighted to see how things have improved since some of the other tiny homes he's seen didn't quite look like the one that we have. So he was quite thrilled with how modern it looked and how great all the things were. He was so surprised at how amazing and beautiful it was on the inside. So things have changed, things are changing. All to say, you do have to have your permits and you do have to go through the permitting and approval processes. So we're totally legally approved now. This home can be here forever, and we're good to go in that space. I think the one thing that I would say that is key to purchasing land is don't get the zoning wrong, because that will just mess up everything if you do not have the right zoning. And you think you're buying this beautiful piece of land that you're going to put your tiny house on, and then you find out you can't put a tiny house on it. So hopefully this video has helped you. I hope it's encouraged you. And I hope that as you dream and as you search and as you actively pursue your dreams, that you do your due diligence so that you make sure that the piece of property that you buy works for exactly what you need. If you have questions, leave them in the comments below, and I hope you have a very, very blessed day. Bye.